Hello, this is Kevin with Bangert Inc. And today we're going to take a look at the detail behind building an estimate in Sage Estimating with no front-end work on our estimating side to know where the information in job cost to send the estimate over to Sage Intacct. So in a previous session, we actually showed the process of how to transfer an estimate from estimating to Sage Intacct. If everything was all set up where I could just build an estimate, all the cost codes were in good shape and just automatically went to where they needed to go. Another session that we had was the specific details on how to set up to get my username and password and so forth set up for Sage Intacct. So kind of the security aspects of getting it set up. So on this video, I'm going to take a look at it from the estimating side of, how can I take an estimate that was built before we had Sage Intacct in place, tell it that we've got Sage Intacct in place and recode the estimate and be able to transfer it over, and then get into what we could do to the estimating database to make future transfers, less steps. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and get me an estimate going here. So I'm just going to say that I want a new estimate. And I'm just going to say this is a Sage. And the database I want to use is going to be this one right here where I don't have anything set up. So this database technically is set up for Sage 300, which we'll see after a while. So I'm going to say that's good for an estimate. Whoops, no, it's not. I've used that one before apparently. So I'm just going to go and say revision 2, just so it's different. And I'm just going to go ahead and accept the cover page the way it is. I'm going to get rid of one of the tabs at the bottom. Well, I'm going to leave it there because it's right now trying to go to my Sage 300 that I'll notice for login. So in this case here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the tab just because I'm going to say that probably a lot of users may not have that, initially set up for 300 or not. So I'm going to just say remove. For some reason, it looks like I got a couple of dupes. I'm going to get rid of those. Okay, so I'm in my blank spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw some takeoff together here to get me something going. So I'm going to go to takeoff. I'm going to go to models. Let's just say I want a basic shell of a building. Let's say it's going to be 6 months for 200 by 60 foot tall walls. Maybe I only need 300 foot of walls interior. So if you don't know anything about assemblies, check out our YouTube channel. There's a couple videos out there, one on how to use models and another one on how to build them and so forth. So basically this model I just went through, it's asked me a handful of questions. If I come back now and tell it to generate it for my estimate, it's going to basically go off and generate a handful of items and then a handful of assemblies to make up this estimate that I've got. So right here in a matter of a few seconds, I've got me a pretty full-size estimate here of at least, some of the major sections of this project. So all of this would still be the same as what you're doing. So at this point, I'm going to say that we're awarded the job and I'm ready to start thinking about getting this thing sent over to Sage Intacct. So the first thing I need to do is a couple things. One thing is if I change my database to know about Sage Intacct and the estimate, seems like it remembers the password, username and password a little bit more consistent and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and for a moment, just back out of my estimating here. And I'm going to go into Management Console. So keep in mind, under estimating, if you clicked on your Windows logo and find your estimating for whatever version you're on, you're going to have things like the Sage Estimating, Database Editor, Management Console. So that's where I'm at the moment. Within Management Console, there's a button here for database where I can see all my databases on my system. Here's the database that we're currently working with. So I'm going to go and edit it. And I'll see down here at the bottom that it was associated with Sage 300. Well, I want it to be associated with Sage Intacct. And I need to go through and do some setup things. So my setup things are basically, what is my company? So that would be something given to you by, someone on the accounting side to tell me what your company, ID would be and so forth. The username is basically what we got set up when we did one of the prior videos on how to get a user set up for the Sage Estimating to interact with. So basically it had a username and password. I'm going to tell it to save my sign-in credentials so I don't have to keep putting that in. And then basically it knows Sage Intacct now, and it wants to know what different categories in estimating associate with what categories in or cost types in my Sage Intacct. So if I take a look at the list, I can say, well, labor goes to labor, and material goes to material, and sub goes to sub. And equipment, in my case, I'm going to say goes to just equipment, but this is also where, if you had both equipment rented and equipment owned and multiple choices, this is where either A, you might pick what's more likely in your database, or B, you could leave it blank so that way when you're going through database editor or through an estimate, maybe you'll define whether it's going to be owned or rented that I'm going to be using on that job. And I'm going to say other goes to other. If I check this box, that will also go through and update all the items in this database to have the right categories. And basically, that's all I need to change on the database at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this and go back into my estimating and open that same estimate back up that we're just looking at. So when I'm looking at this estimate, there's a few things that I need to do to the estimate. So one of them is almost the same thing. If I go and look at my home and info, so if I think about if I build an estimate after I change the database, it would at least know about the right accounting system and things of that nature. Since I created this estimate prior to that being changed in my database, this is where if I take a look at this estimate, it's still going to have the incorrect information. So I'm going to go off and change the estimate just about like what we just did for the database. And I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier that first setting for the database, I could skip that and just go right through here and set it up for one particular job. The only thing that I found is it does seem like this save sign-in information does seem to do a better job of saving it if I set up my database first, so it at least has that same similar information in there. And then I do want it to go through all the cost types here also, so that way I don't have to do it within that estimate. So I'm going to go down through the same relationship of what my categories are. And I'm going to update it to all my cost items. And then I'm going to hit OK. And OK again. So that at least lets this estimate know that at some point I'm going to be transferring it to Sage Intacct. Now, the other thing that is in here that I might put in at this point, or I could put it in later, is there's also a place where I could tell it what job number. So I am going to go ahead and come back and tell it the job number also. So there again, this opened up my list of my projects in my Sage Intacct. So this is a list of all my project. Here's a particular project that I'm working with today. And I'm just going to say, okay then. So now most estimates, the estimating phase may or may not match what your accounting phases are. So in my case, they don't. They're nowhere close. All my accounting cost codes start with a G for GC and so forth, trying to keep division separate from the rest of types of instruction that are in the sample environment that I'm working with. So in my case, I want to set up a tab so I can sort the estimate by job cost codes. So I'm going to go up to my sequences where I could set up a new tab. And I'm going to hit add. I'm going to find my box with the 3 dots on it so I can pull up a list. And let's say job cost phase. Now, if I know we're going to be transferring a lot of jobs in the future, I might also want to go to database. And this is where you can set up those tabs in the database ahead of time so that way they could be out there. So I could hit, in my case, it's already there, but I could hit edit, add job cost phase to the list. And by being under databases here, this would make it where every new estimate going forward would automatically have the tab for job cost phase right off the bat. So you could skip this step I'm doing at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. There's my new tab for job cost phase. When I click on it, I'm going to notice that basically I've got a whole bunch of codes in here already and no descriptions in here at all. And none of these follow the right format. These are all my codes for Sage 300, nothing to do with my Sage Intacct and so forth. So the next thing I want to do is I want to take a moment and actually just move some of this information around. So if I take a look at this superintendent, I could go off here and say I want to move that. So I could move it, copy it. So in this case, I want to move it from that 1-041 and I want to move it to so when I click on the three dots, it's going to pull up a list of what my standard cost codes are. Or also, since this project is already set up, I could see the cost codes associated with this project also. So, you know, if this was a brand new job and no estimates have been entered yet or no costs have been entered yet, you know, it may not have very many cost codes in there at this point. So I could just keep it on standard and go through my standard list and find, you know, the codes that I'm looking for. So in my case here, all my codes start with a G. So I'm going to come on down to the G's. And I'm just going to lump that to project coordination at the moment. So I'm going to hit OK. It's got my new version of my number there. When I hit OK again, it's going to go ahead and drop it down below here for my new format. Now, in this version, there's basically something going on where these don't refresh the description right off the bat. So I'm going to go ahead and get a few of them in here, and then I'm going to close this estimate down and open it back up, and you'll see all the descriptions populate when I go off and do that. So let's take a look at what I got here. So temporary toilet, I'm just going to go ahead and throw that under utilities. So I'm just going to go ahead and say move copy items. Let's say that I want to move these two, and I'm going to go to the project just so I don't have as many cost codes to look at. So I'm going to just lump that to temporary utilities for my John on the spot there, let's say. Then as I take a look at this division, you know, maybe that's a lot of, what do we got there? Excavation. So I'm going to say that's going to get all lumped together with excavation. Now I could highlight individual lines to do my move copy. If I keep a folder collapsed, it would automatically do everything. So theoretically, everything that's in that heading in my mind all needs to go to some other heading. So if I keep it collapsed, I can go off and do move copying or do all three of those items at once. Keep in mind also that you could do things like maybe use your control key. So I could say, well, that one and that one, and just tag certain lines. So that way it's a little bit easier than moving things around and so forth. So I'm going to start with just doing the one first. So I'm going to say move copy. And let's say that this is going to be project, so I don't have as many to look at. And I'm going to say that has to do with excavation and backfill. So, okay. And basically there's my new, heading down below. Now, I purposely didn't move all of them because this is where I'm going to also say maybe both of these items, and instead of using the move feature, you can also use drag and drop. So I can basically drag and drop those down below, and that basically is another way of coding things out. So I've always been mystified watching clients, even with the Sage 300, where, they'll print out a report to Excel, they'll jockey a whole bunch of numbers around, they'll print something out, hand it to someone to key, and they sit there and, well, it's easier this way. Well, the neat thing about using the actual interface is this is going to go through and validate that all these are valid codes right up front, and it's going to give me a list of what the different items are associated with each one to really make sure that I'm right, and then no one also has to turn around and key it all. So takes a little bit to code these out and so forth, but if I go through and get my database whipped into shape better next time, it would actually go faster the next time through, which we'll show you towards the end of this session. So let's see, that all looks like, let's say, forming stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and say I want to move those to somewhere else. Let's go ahead and say that I want to move those to, let's just say formwork. And wire mesh, I'm going to move it. And what else we got out here? Some stripping and only forms. So I'm going to go ahead and put that with the rest of my form material. So that looks like that was information down there. So I'm going to just drag and drop it so I don't have to re-go through the list and go find it. And let's see, looks like I've got some concrete there. So let's go ahead and say that I want to move copy that. And maybe that's going to go to some structural concrete. And anchor bolts, trusses. I'm going to throw my anchor bolts in with, I'm going to say that goes more with my concrete and so forth when they're doing that. Maybe trusses, I'm going to go ahead and say move copy there. And maybe I'll pick something to do with some structural steel. That's close enough for this. So what do we got over here? So maybe I've got some, maybe that's to do with framing. Framing, I'm going to skip my sheetrock. Maybe that's to do with framing. 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 So let's move copy all those combinations to Division 6. Let's say some wood framing. And let's say we got some insulation. And what do we got there? So we've got, I think I'm just going to lump all the roofing stuff together there, let's say. And we're just shingle. And Division 9, so let's say we're going to put our sheetrock nails together with our gypsum board and finishing. And let's go back to move again. I don't remember if that's plumbing or mechanical or both. I'm gonna move it down there and then come back and take a look at it. So it looks like I got two different ones going on. So let's move those somewhere else. So what was that one? That was a plumbing one. Stick that over to plumbing. And let's actually stick the HVAC over. So basically, like you saw there, if you put it to the wrong code, it's very easy to either move it somewhere else or drag and drop it to some other heading and so forth as you need to. So real easy to kind of match up where your different cost codes need to be. I think that's all electric. So let's go ahead and say that's going to be move copy to. And then these items here have the word multiple on them, because apparently they've got more than one cost code on them. So these are all going to be like temporary utilities and stuff like that, which in my case, I think I had them all under, this was going to be where I was going to lump all those together. So I'm just going to grab all those and drag and drop those down below. So if I close this estimate down and come back into it so it gets a chance to refresh my cost codes there, now when I take a look at my list of cost codes, I'll actually get a very nice description on what my standard cost code is associated with that. So that way I know, okay, that I'm lumping all together into that I'm lumping all together into that. So I can kind of see the relationship of where all these items are going. So when I get done here, if I collapse it, everything should have a description. So if there's anything there that doesn't really have a description, it lets me know that for whatever reason, it may not be matching up with one of the codes over on my intact side. So that's basically what it would take to code out, the estimate. Now, in my case, because when I set up the estimate, I told it to put LAB in here and MAT in there, so on and so forth. So it's already got my category set up. But this is also where, if I had multiple categories where I had equipment that we own versus equipment that we rent and so forth, this is where I could come in here and actually select for that item. What category do I want that to go to, or what cost type do I want that to go to on my Sage Intacct side? And there again, it could pull up my list of all my different standard categories to pick from and so forth. In my case, I'm going to just leave them to E for equipment. Now, this is also where I think it's handy to have a layout that shows you, your job cost view, material job cost cat, sub cat, equipment cat, other cat. So that way you could have all 5 categories on the screen just to make sure that everything's going to the right categories. So in this case here, I'm going to say all that looks good. I'm going to take a look at my total page for a moment. So in my case, I'm going to change these around a little bit just for a better example. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these couple out of my list, and I'm going to insert another one for, let's say this project really had some bond or something in it. So when we think about add-ons, there are 3 things that can happen with an add-on. I could back allocate it. So I want to be careful with back allocating because, if you weren't paying attention, you could back allocate your profit against all the different cost codes, which would make things, overinflated for a cost code. Now, the cool thing about the Sage Intacct transfer is if you mess one up, no harm, no foul. You can go right back through the interface steps again and transfer an estimate over a second time or a third time and not double and quadruple things up like we've had with the, Sage 300. So in this case, it makes it a lot friendlier on, making a mistake and retransferring an estimate over without having to go to, accounting and move money from one cost code to another. It also lends itself for those clients that do like design build where maybe I'll do a preliminary estimate with a 60% worth of drawings or a 80% of drawings or different levels and so forth. And you could actually bring over multiple estimates and actually keep them separate and actually be able to look at some reporting that might show you the difference between our 60% and our 80% versions of those estimates and so forth. So in this case here, I'm going to say that sales tax is the only thing I want to back allocate. So that way it's going to basically take this money on what it's based on, which in this case is material, and it's going to back spread on the materials as far as when it goes over to the job cost side. Profit. If I take a look at profit, I don't want to allocate it. And if I look at edit add-on, I want to make sure that it does not have a cost code. So in profit's case, I don't want profit to go over at all because in my case, I'm saying that my budget is what I really anticipate on paying. So I don't want profit to skew it. We always have like a contract that actually will be, this in my mind is what I consider the contract price or round it off or whatever type of thing. Whereas my estimate is really, almost $40,000 short of that. Now bond, I do want it to come over. So I don't want it back spread though. So I'm going to go and edit that add-on and let's see where it's trying to go to currently. So I'm pretty sure that's not a right code. So I'm going to go ahead and look in my list of cost codes here. And I'm going to just throw that under insurance. And I'm going to say that that corresponds with category of other. So at this point, I've done a couple major things. I've went through the estimate and made sure that each item's going to good cost codes, good categories. And then I've also went back and looked at my add-ons to know, what I'm expecting here. Now, it's also good to actually go through and look at your grand total and, know what dollar amount to expect. So in my case, I'm not going to be expecting this just shy of 600,000. I'm going to be really, 38,000 less of that and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and say save there. And I'm going to go ahead and actually transfer this over to my Intacct now. So I go up to advanced. I go to export to Intacct. This brings up a 4-step procedure. So I'm going to say next there. So the first part is it already filled in the project ID because I went through the under home, the info, and I told it the job up front, though you could come back in here and pull up a list and pick something different or not have put that first one in there and put it in. When you put the job number in there, it's going to tell you things like the job description so you can confirm you got the right job. It's also going to show you what entity it's part of, beginning dates, ending dates, locations, departments, a few other things if, they were put in on that project. I'm going to go ahead and say next in this case. So this is going to create a new estimate ID that's going to transfer over to. And I'm just going to call it, original estimate, revision 1. Or, maybe I can say revision 60% drawings. My estimate date, and I'm going to say that that is my original estimate I'm going to currently run with. And as you've seen there, you did have some options of, I want this to kind of be my current estimate and take over, or this is where I'm going to kind of do some forecasting with estimate budgets and so forth. So a few different things than what we've had before for do some other comparison of these different numbers together. And in my case, I'm going to tell it I want to allocate add-ons because I've got sales tax that I want to allocate. I'm not going to look at a report in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, because I made sure that I had everything lined up the way I wanted it in my spreadsheet itself. So then in this case, it's going to go through an export procedure and give me a little confirmation on what it's done. So basically there's my $557,000 estimate that I had. So if I go back and take a look at my Sage Intacct now, and I'm going to go up to my menu and I'm going to go to job and jobs. And here is the job that we're just looking at. So if I go ahead and say that I want to edit that job and look at my estimate, I'll see that I've got, original estimate, revision, my 60%, version or something of that nature. Right now, because I didn't have any other estimate, this has been, promoted to be my primary estimate at the moment. And there's that same, dollar amount that we had that was transferred. Now, if I take a look at this little pencil here, it'll give me the detail of what it actually is brought over. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so I can see more information out of here. And I'm going to sort it by cost code. So this basically shows me each cost code and category that was brought over as part of that estimate. Now, one of the real neat things about this is when we've done transfers with Sage 100, Sage 300, Procore, a lot of other systems roll that up to a cost code. So all you see is the total dollars for a cost code and category combination. But if I take a look at here, there was those temporary utilities that I did. So we've got 4 things going to temporary utilities, 3 of them are going to other, and 1 of them is going to a material. If I look over at this memo, I can actually see that that was actually my hookup for phone versus the temporary phone. So the cool thing about this is it actually gives me the phase and item number and description from my estimate of what made up that bucket of money. So, when someone's looking at a cost code and maybe I don't understand what made up some of that cost, very handy to be able to get more detail than we've ever had in the past. So I can now get pretty much my detail of, what type of sheets exactly did we say? So, I lumped it all to just, welded wire mesh and so forth, but I could see that in my estimate, apparently it was 6.6 by 10.10 and so forth for my item description. Bringing over any quantities, any dollars. Where was my bond? Because bond was one of my add-ons. So if I take a look at insurance here, there's basically where my bond showed up and what the dollar amount was. So very handy. All that information could just come right over from my estimate to get that project set up. Now, I also said earlier that you can do multiple estimates. So if I go ahead and say cancel here for a moment, if you did another estimate, you could see, just like you see here, here's my current estimate at 80% drawings or something of that nature. So that way you could see a list of different ones, over here on this side of things. Now, the next thing I want to take a look at is it took some time to go back and put all those cost codes on those line items in the estimate. So I'm going to go back to estimating and actually show some what can I do to my database to make that not as painful of going through and, coding those lines out. So a few things. Some clients I work with use template estimates. So they'll build an estimate, copy that estimate to build their next estimate and things of that nature. So if I made this my template estimate and copied it, all these line items would already have those cost codes in there because I've done it once. I could also go through and edit my database. So if I were to go through and right click on an item and say edit database item, so I could be looking at this particular database item and look at my job cost phase, I can go in here and say, well, that's that old Sage 300 code. There again, I could click on the 3 dots with lines on it so I can pull it from a list. Did that change databases on me? Why does that still look like the old database? Oh, I wonder because, let me close that switch databases back because we put that job cost information in after we had estimating open. So let's see, I want to go back to this one that we do actually have set up for Intacct now. Let's go back to that estimate that I was just looking at there a moment ago. And let's look at it by job cost phase again. And let's go back to edit database item. So this is where I could go through and tell it what code should be in here. So that way the next time it automatically knows. And I don't know why that's saying 300 again. Did I not get my database up to date? Let me close estimating and open it back up. Okay, open the same one up, and let's go take a look at that again. So that was about intact on that aspect so far. And let's go edit database item and see what this knows about. So if I take a look at my category list, what is my category list gonna, or my cost code list gonna show me? There we go. Yeah, I must have had a good estimate. So let's see. So let's say that was in my G's again. And let's say that is something to do with project coordination, let's say in this case. So, there again, I could go through the database and actually go and change these. So now the next estimate, if I were to use this item, it would have a good cost code associated with it. It's one method. Another method is to use an estimate to help you make those changes. So I've already went through the effort of coding all this estimate out. So if I go back up into my properties and look, let's actually right click and say insert. And let's say that I'm looking for a column called update database. So what update database allows you to do is you can pick what items in your estimate you want it to go back and update the database with. So in my case, if I come in here and say, okay, I want to do all those and I want to do all those and I want to do all those and so you kind of get the idea. I've just about got all my items from this job flagged. So then if I go up to my data, this is all my database options. So it's saying update from an estimate. This is where I can pick what things in my estimate do I want to push back to my database. So in my case, the only thing I want to push back is maybe my job cost phase. Because in my case, I already pushed my categories, but if you had unique categories, you could push those back also. So I'm going to come on down then and let's say material job cost phase, sub job cost phase. And equipment somewhere along the way. Okay, there, I think I got them all. And I'm going to say I don't need a report on what it's going to do, but the report is handy because in the file, it would actually put, here's the old code and the new code to show you what it actually modified. And in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. It's going to show me that these are the fields that are going to get changed. And when I hit OK, that went ahead and said there's 32 items updated. So if I go back and take a look at one of these items now, so if I edit that database and look at job costs, that's already got my new cost code in there. So me coding that estimate out once, telling the system to save it back to all those items makes it where if I build another new estimate using these particular items, they would already be coded. So then maybe all I'd have to do is code out the ones that were, not being used in one of this estimate so far. So that's another method. You could also go up to data and items, and you've got that same job cost field in there. So that way you could go through each one of your different, items and put those cost codes and so forth on there. So there's that superintendent one that I've already done. And then your other method to get those in there is with database editor. So if I close this down and I'm opening up my database editor here, and let's say I want to open up a database. So I'm going to say new, open there. And here's my one I've just set up for Intact now. It's going to ask me for my sign-in credentials. So now I've already set up a view. So theoretically, when you go into yours, you might have all columns of, whatever columns it's set up to show you and things of that nature. So if you keep in mind, you can highlight, different columns, come in here and tell it to hide those columns and things of that nature to come up with what you want. And once you get done with turning off all these columns and changing the widths to what you want them to be and things of that nature, or you could also click and hold and drag a field from one place to another. Once you get all these columns set up the way you want them, you can go up here to save layout as, and actually give it a name so that way you can use it in the future. So in my case, I've already created one called JC View, where basically I've just got, here's my labor cost code, my category, units to job cost, my material category, units to job cost, so on and so forth for each category. So as you can see here, there's that one that I did earlier already done. But this is where I could go down through and change them here is easier than one at a time through estimating. So this is also where I could go through there and highlight a bunch of items, and I could actually go down through there and say, okay, well, do a fill down because maybe all those should be the same code. So, a little bit faster than doing one by one if they are sequential and so forth. And if I hit undo, it'll take those away and so forth. So that way it's just a matter of going through there, getting them coded. Anything of mine that has to do with time, so like hour, I'm transferring over the takeoff quantity. So that's where a lot of those items had quantities of hours transferred. Versus a lot of my material, I'm saying none. So that way it doesn't try to add the square footage, lineal footage, and all these things that maybe I lump to the same code, but maybe I don't want all the quantities getting lumped together and so forth. So with Database Editor, you could just go through your whole entire database, putting things to what cost codes they need to go to in more of a spreadsheet looking fashion. Then when you get done, you can tell it to check it back in. And as you get more and more of those codes done in your database, that just makes the interface go that much faster. So, if you haven't saw the first session was just an overview. The overview, we build an estimate, transfer it to job cost, and all that's done within a few minutes and so forth. So, this one took me quite a while because I had to go through and code it all out. But if you've got a lot of that work done ahead of time, within 8 minutes, you could sit there and have that project over there in my job cost. Hopefully that helps. Let us know if you got any questions. Thank you for your time.